Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be discussing the Fear and Greed Index. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. If you're not familiar with the Fear and Greed Index, it comes from this website here. It's currently at a level of 50. It's going to update in about 58 minutes, so by the time you watch this video, the Fear and Greed Index will probably actually be different. But it's made up of several different things: volatility, market momentum, social media, dominance, and trends. And so that's what goes into making it up. And the reason why I like to look at it is because, generally speaking, you'll go into these phases where the Fear and Greed Index will go into the 90s, and then sometimes it'll go below 20, right? Now, if you guys remember earlier this year, when the Fear and Greed Index hit 90, I said back then that was probably going to play out more similar to 2019, where you just get one or two Fear and Greed Index data points in the 90s, as opposed to something that we saw back in late 2020, early 2021. Now, back then, that was not necessarily well received because we were at new all-time highs. So for a lot of people, I think it suggested that it was more likely over here than just 2019. But this does go to show that all-time highs doesn't even necessarily bring people back like it did in late 2020 and early 2021. I think you also have to have, you know, altcoins joining that party. And back in March, Bitcoin was hitting new all-time highs, but a lot of altcoins have not hit all-time highs at this point. And so you could argue that's the reason why it didn't stay in that extreme greed territory longer, is just Bitcoin. And frankly, a lot of people, while they recognize Bitcoin as king, I think a lot of them actually have larger positions in altcoins than they do in Bitcoin. So this did end up playing out like 2019. Okay, you can see. And then, by the way, it's been about 6 months. If you guys remember, the 2019 downturn lasted about 6 months. It's been about 6 months so far as well this time. Now, it remains unclear, obviously, if it's going to play out the exact same way. What happened last time is Bitcoin got a rally, and then it ultimately got a hard landing. I doubt it's going to play out in the exact same manner. So do keep that in mind. Furthermore, in the short term, the Fear and Greed Index still has to break the lower high structure, right? And I think that in the same way that price has to break the lower high structure, Bitcoin's Fear and Greed Index arguably needs to break it. If you look at the raw values here, you can see that basically there was a high in March at like 90, and then a lower high in June at 78, and then a lower high in July at 74. And so far, the highest it's gone in this rally is around 59. Now, it's probably going to go up after I make this video because there's going to be an update in less than an hour from when I'm making it. But this is another structure that it ultimately has to break. You can see that in 2019, what ended up happening was it also put in lower highs, right? 95, and then 84, and then 66, and then, in the 40s. And then it finally started to put in a higher high. Price still went down, but it was like a divergence, right, between the fear and greed and the price. We actually saw something very similar back in 2022, but the opposite, right? In 2022, fear and greed index bottomed in June, but then price went a little bit lower in November, but it was a higher fear and greed index. So you might see that divergence form at some point, just like it formed in 2019. So that will be something interesting to keep an eye on. So far, we have not yet seen that divergence form, but it is something, obviously, that we should keep an eye on. You can see the same thing that happened in 2020, early 2021. Like the fear and greed index topped out over here. Price went a little bit higher, but the fear and greed index was already going down. So that might help, I think, in terms of figuring out when trends are shifting, when you see divergence in the fear and greed. Like if the price is making a higher high, but the fear and greed is making a lower high, that could be a signal. Or the reverse, right? If the price is making a lower low, but the fear and greed is making a higher high, or a higher low, I should say, that might also be a signal. And that's actually kind of how the last several moves played out, right? Like the end of 2022, there was a divergence between the price and the fear and greed. And then in early 2021, there was a divergence between the price and the fear and greed. The other thing that might be worthwhile to do is to actually apply moving average, right? Because I mean, the fear and greed index is great, but there are times where it goes into extreme greed, like it went into the 90s in November of 2020. And if you'd sold all your Bitcoin there, you would have missed out on another 3x move, right? So some of the things you could do to help clean it up a little bit is to apply a moving average to it. And this is an SMA. If you want it to be a little bit more clear, a little bit more helpful, maybe switching over to an EMA where it goes to it a little bit quicker. But I thought, hey, how does this compare to 2019? What's interesting is the Fear and Greed Index 30-day SMA in 2019 topped at around 75, and then this time it topped at around 80. And then it ultimately found a low here in September at 30, and then another low at 24, and then a final low at 12, right? So you can see sort of these lower lows that occurred. But before the hard landing, we did see a higher high. Now, so far, what we've seen is a low and then a high. Well, first a high, then a low, and then a lower high, a lower low, and then a lower high, a lower low. Now, here's where it's going to, we have to watch, see if it actually puts in a higher high or not. If it puts in a higher high, then you could argue it's starting to follow the pattern from what happened as Bitcoin was coming out of the downtrend in 2019. If it fails to put in a lower high, then it could just be a continuation of what happened in 2019. You can see that actually in 2019, it bounced in early September from a 30-day estimated fear and greed index of 30, which is basically where it just bounced from in September of 2024. Now, back then, the fear and greed index 30-day SMA climbed to a little bit over 43. Right now, the 30-day SMA is 37. So I would also keep an eye on that as well, because history does have a way of repeating itself sometimes, and you might get a similar type of move as we saw happen in 2019. So do keep an eye on that, and I will obviously provide updates. I only provide updates on the Fear and Greed Index about once a month or so, just because there's really not a whole lot happening with it for longer periods of time. But if you do like an EMA, right? If you look at a 30-day EMA, you can see that it has already started to move up quite a bit here. And this is also approximately where it bounced from in September of 2019, right? You can kind of see the same thing. September of 2024, September of 2019. And so there still are similarities with 2019. And again, the thing that I debate back and forth on is what's more important, the time-based component where you've already had a 6-month downtrend, or these other structural things that occur that we've talked a little bit about in some of the prior videos, and I'll talk some more about in future videos as well. But that's where Bitcoin is on the Fear and Greed Index. So far, this structure has not yet changed, but I imagine it will start to go through some changes as we go later into this year and early next year. But that'll wrap it up for the video. We're going to keep it short today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and again, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.